Hello, my name is Serene Tefaha from Advocate Me. I'm working currently with a group of health practitioners. These practitioners are registered and are regulated by the regulatory board called AHPRA, which stands for Australian Health Practitioner Regulatory Agency. The health practitioners vary from chiropractors to nurses to doctors, medical practitioners and paramedics. The main concern of these health practitioners is the method and the way in which AHPRA is regulating their freedom to communicate and to express concerns that they have in relation to vaccine efficacy and vaccine safety, and specifically in relation to vaccine adverse reactions. The problem that we see is this, that AHPRA is regulated by a legislative scheme themselves called the Health Practitioner Regulation National Law Act, which is then mirrored across the states and territories. But essentially, as a federal regulator, there are a number of parts within this act that seeks to deal with perceived misconduct and also issues around behaviours and performance of practitioners. What has happened is that the AHPRA has used some of these laws, to actually state that if any opinion is expressed in terms of any concerns associated with vaccines, even if those concerns are listed in the leaflet and in the actual health information provided by the vaccine company themselves and in observed reactions, even in their own offices, that any kind of expression of concern, any kind of expression in terms of an opinion about the public health ramifications of vaccines will be seen 100% by AHPRA as anti-vax. So you're either 100% with vaccines or you're 100% against vaccines. So there are a number of, as I said, provisions. Principally, there is Section 140 where it talks about the notifiable conduct of a health practitioner, where they place the public at risk of harm by practicing the profession in a way that constitutes a significant departure from accepted professional standards. And in another part, it talks about public health and safety. And how AHPRA has interpreted this in their own policies is that any criticism that comes in relation to vaccines, even if this criticism is warranted, and even if there are issues in relation to vaccine safety or vaccine efficacy, you would be perceived that you would be anti-government, anti the public health programs, and you would be constituted as being anti-vax. Now, there's a lot of concern with this, and specifically as well with their social media policies and the codes of conduct, where they give specific examples that anyone who obviously has a criticism of vaccine will be perceived and treated as an anti-vaxxer. Now, this is concerning, very concerning, because what AHPRA is actually saying is quite authoritarian. It's saying that just because government has presented a public health program that advocates vaccines, that means if there are issues that come out or even observed issues in relation to medical practitioners' practice, or if they observe that in their practice that someone's come and complained about a vaccine or has received a reaction as a result of vaccine, that medical practitioner or health practitioner are muzzled from actually feeling that they actually can express their concerns in that regard. And this is extremely dangerous. And I'm going to give you an example of how dangerous really this is. About 10 years ago, a vaccine manufacturer called CSL Limited released the Fluvax into the market. here in Australia. And in particularly Perth, there has been a huge reliance on the flu vax. And in 2010 specifically, there were over 111 reported adverse reactions, serious adverse reactions to the hospital, to the PMD hospital. And the emergency doctors there, instead of actually reacting appropriately and seeking the notifications with regards to these adverse reactions, they felt muzzled and not really reporting these public health risks. So in fact, what AHPRA is doing through their policies is muzzling the ability for doctors to actually report anything that might go wrong with vaccines, just like any other medication. And so what ended up happening is that there were numerous children who were getting hurt. And we're not talking here about a little bit of pain, we're talking about global brain damage. And in one particular case, a tragic case of Saba, a beautiful young girl, once she got the flu vax, she had global injuries, she had febrile convulsions, she became a quadriplegic and almost blind because of receiving the flu vax. And what is astounding in this matter is that the information, the health information of published studies, risks, okay, there were risks associated with that were known to CSL, and the body, the government body that oversees the assessment of drugs and the approval of drugs is the Therapeutic Goods Administrators, the TGA, and they actually had given this a tick of approval. And there was no appropriate assessments really that were carried out into safety, into in fact the risks, and into this what companies thought that they can just put it out there without actually any trials, okay, because you don't need any trials with flu vaccines, seasonal flu vaccines, and also no checks and balances in relation to those risks. So you have this situation that has catapulted from the vaccine company not doing the right thing to TGA not doing the right thing, to then AHPRA regulating these doctors who were reporting on the reactions, but not passing this information on. And then the Department of Health sitting out here realizing this is happening and not taking the action quick enough. And meanwhile, you have serious injury. And meanwhile, Saba became brain damaged. Of course, the Saba's family sued the manufacturer. They said it's not our fault because we get the green light to do whatever we want. And hence the Western Australian government paid a sizable settlement, but we don't know obviously the quantity because it's all confidential. So what I'm saying here is that we have a situation, in fact, where the public health risks that were associated with that particular vaccine were in fact muzzled and children got hurt and brain damage. We're not talking here just about an anaphylactic reaction. We're talking here about brain damage for life. And this is obviously an extreme circumstance, but that is the likelihood of a lot of damage that could be created by vaccines. And this is their own companies putting this out in their own leaflets. So what we're saying is that AHPRA takes a very militant approach to openness and communication and, in fact, scientific inquiry and proper reporting. There's no mandatory reporting for vaccine injuries in Australia. So you have this catapulsion of issues and they just end up being actually about a failure of public policy and a failure of public health because of these really extreme opinions, and yet the facts and the evidence speak a very different story. So I am urging and inviting health practitioners across Australia to fill out a form. It will all be private because this complaint will be anonymous, and the reason why it will be anonymous because you will be targeted, quite frankly, by AHPRA if you put your name there. But we will be putting a very comprehensive complaint, first point to AHPRA and obviously to other government departments as well. And then if there's a failure to deal with that, then we will escalate accordingly. But the links and the forms are all attached. Part of this blurb as well. That'll be part of a blurb that we'll have which will direct you to where you put the forms. But as I said, it's very confidential and your information will be very strictly protected. So we look forward to contacting you and to putting this complaint and really starting to protect public health issues rather than failing to protect them. Thank you for your time.